Broad was the consensus. Member states didn't even have to vote to affirm the day. They simply agreed, a decision through consensus. And in November of 2009, it was done.
One would have expected African countries, or South Africa for that matter, to initiate this whole process. But actually, it was the non-aligned movement that started this whole thing, which actually meant that Nelson Mandela did not belong to South Africa only. He did not belong to Africa only. He belonged to the whole world.
But according to the South African mission, it was in fact President Jacob Zuma who had lobbied his colleagues at the 2009 NAM summit in Egypt, resulting in a declaration endorsing Nelson Mandela International Day, adding impetus to efforts at the United Nations.
Close to two-thirds of the members of the UN General Assembly are members of the non-aligned movement. So once then a decision was taken by the summit that all the non-aligned movement member states of the UN should support the resolution, it was clear then that the resolution was going to pass.
And while South Africa and certain countries had already recognized the day,
evil is the mind that says they don't.
An all-star inaugural concert in New York in July of 2009 created much-needed buzz. This was a train that wasn't stopping. In recognizing Nelson Mandela's contribution to the struggle for democracy internationally and following the inaugural Nelson Mandela Day in July of 2009, the General Assembly in November of that same year designated Madiba's birthday an international day in his name and invited member states of the organization to observe the day in an appropriate manner. Was this such a significant resolution to pass General Assembly muster?
For the time in the close to 70 years history of the UN, there has never been a day declared in the name of an individual. There have been many other days that have some relations to events, like for example, you have the Day of Non-Violence, which is linked to Gandhi. But there was a consensus that for Mandela, it has to be an exception, that you can have a day named after an individual by the UN for the first time.
Jean-Victor Nkolo, who served as spokesperson of the General Assembly when the idea first surfaced at the UN, called the resolution's passage rare and unprecedented. And unlike the difficult negotiations that accompany the passage of UN resolutions, be they in the General Assembly or the Security Council, this 1.5-page text proved uncontroversial in every sense of the word.
He became like the equalizer, the peacemaker. His name alone, his persona became what everybody can agree, and the consensus became just spontaneous.
Mashabane says it's with a great sense of gratitude that South Africa was able to have Madiba recognized in this way. That the day is not just about the Mandela name, but a legacy of service that must continue in that name.
The world can pause for a moment and say, here is a son of Africa, a son of South Africa, but a son of the world that we want to honor and recognize the contribution that he has made. That's what the resolution says. It talks about his contribution to the struggles of Africans, but beyond that, his contribution to humanity and the globe at large.
It has become a moment in our lives when people stop, think, and act in a positive way. When they try, and they will certainly not be able to emulate and to achieve what this extraordinary man has done. What they are trying to do, however, is to try to come close to his ideals. And these ideals of Nelson Mandela have become everybody's ideals. And it is very, very true that at the General Assembly, it was clear that simply because this was about Nelson Mandela, the resolution was easy.
67 minutes to celebrate a life, honor a legacy, and serve humanity. In small measure, as Madiba did greatly, and continues to do. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News at the United Nations, New York.